Good morning, everybody, and welcome to DMS 3000 News Live. This is episode 45 for Friday, August 18th, 2023. And I am your host and moderator for this, Brandon Martin. And I would like to thank David for taking over for me from yesterday. So hopefully he had a good show. And back to where I am now to wrap up the week. And with that, on today's show, we'll be talking about the 54th anniversary of Mick Jagger accidentally shot while filming Ned Kelly. That would happen in Australia. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we'll talk about the 411th anniversary of Pendle Witch's trial. And then we'll wrap up with the 60th anniversary of James Meredith graduates at Ole Miss, the first African-American graduate. Then we'll talk about, this is an editorial, the last 15 minutes of the show, talk about whatever I have in mind. And believe me, I already have something already in my mind and I'll wait till that time comes. And we have what day is today, plus the headlines, sports, and other information. All that and more, we now go with the headlines for Friday, August the 18th, 2023. For 80 years, presidents have used the rustic mountain retreat at Camp David to host foreign leaders. President Biden is hoping to tap into that history for talks with Japan and South Korea on Friday. President Biden will host Japan and Korea's leaders at Camp David. Mortgage rates have hit a 2-decade high. Poor air quality can drive you indoors, but do you know what you're breathing inside your home? Here's the latest on optimizing ventilation and other air clearing strategies. When everyone was trying to escape the flames in Lahaina, Las Vegas ran toward them. Her son was home alone. Days later, she found his body. Sunday would have been his 15th birthday. Massachusetts voters approved the Fair Share Amendment in November. It placed a 4% tax on incomes above $1 million, in addition to the state's standard income tax of 5%. While the world focuses on the devastation in West Maui and the destruction of the historic community of Lahaina, another wildfire is still burning in the hills some 25 miles away in Kula. Sinister-looking orbs and cosmic question marks haunted the news. There was also a fourth indictment for a certain former president. As people grapple with more than 100 people who died in the Lahaina fire on Maui, sorry about that. I don't know what the heck was going on, but I hit the turn the phone off, so apologies in advance. But continuing on, they're still trying to understand Lahaina fire on Maui. Okay. They're still trying to understand the loss of priceless artifacts and their connections to the island's ancient past. Populist politicians and right-wing media have convinced many voters that U.S. aid for Ukraine is a waste of money. Domestic problems should take precedent, they say. As military tensions with China rise, Taiwan's companies are pivoting from civilian manufacturing to defense and weapons. Excuse me. New York's Adirondack Park used to be a political powder keg. Now factions are working to find common ground while tackling some big problems. Citing errors by police, a Mississippi judge declared a mistrial Thursday in the case of two white men accused of chasing and shooting at a black FedEx driver who was making a delivery. The suggested April 2026 date is a counter-proposal to the Justice Department's recommendation last week that the trial should begin January 2nd, 2024. City employees will begin to lose access to TikTok and its website from all city-owned devices and networks, according to a New York City Hall spokesperson. A new University of Southern California reports pinpoints areas that need improvement, as well as a few small wins. Brian Houston was ruled not guilty Thursday of an Australian charge of concealing his father's child sex crimes. He resigned from his church roles after being charged 2 years ago. Is it the writer's strike, the Meghan Markle effect, or some secret third thing? The Marion County Record now has all of the devices police seized in a raid. Local newspapers report that the judge who signed the search warrant had 2 drunken driving arrests within a year. Record high temperatures, strong winds, and thunderstorms are prompting warnings for high wildfire danger across the Pacific Northwest. People are consulting weather apps, donning rain gear, and downing electrolytes in a quest to enjoy the 100 days between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Head coach Vlatko Andonovski is probably going to how they pronounce that name correctly, and the U.S. Soccer Federation have mutually agreed to part ways. Their organization said last week the USWNT was knocked out of the World Cup earlier than ever before. And the average cost of a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage jumped to 7.09% this week, the highest in over 2 decades. Rising interest rates have put homes out of reach for many would-be buyers. And that basically is the headlines for Friday, August the 18th, 2023. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the MLB. And we'll get the news up right now. A little bit standby. Okay. And we'll talk a bit more about the standings there once we get to that point. Let's talk about the contenders with the easiest and toughest schedules remaining. This time of year, the MLB standings can be downright addictive. Who's up? Who's down? Who's making a run? Who's fading? Standings are just a snapshot of a season, but it's quite a powerful snapshot. It can feel like the standings can tell you everything, but they can't. And the most important thing they can't tell you is something that cannot show up on a standings page. Games that haven't been played yet, but those games matter just as much as the ones already in the books. The standings can't tell you who a team is going to play, how that team looks, or what sort of path a team has moving forward. Baseball will never be football. Strength of schedule can't matter that much in the macro, but with just a month and a half left, it can tell you a bunch. And some paths to the postseason are a lot smoother than others. Excuse me. Here's a look at the three teams in the pennant chase best position because of their schedule to make a run down the stretch, and the three with the toughest roads ahead of them. These are not based entirely on remaining strength of schedule, though that is a factor. And I tried to focus on teams whose postseason status is uncertain. The Twins, for example, have an easy schedule for the rest of the way, 28th toughest. But it likely won't be a big factor given their fairly comfortable lead over the Guardians in the AL Central and the high likelihood of ending up as a number 3 seed no matter what. It's basically note that strength of schedule numbers can't come via Fangraphs. All stats are through Thursday's games. Three contenders with an easy path, and they are the Chicago Cubs. If you're a Cubs fan, you rather the club have not 3 games against the Braves in September. No one should want to play the Braves at all right now, or maybe ever. But if you're wondering why the projections systems are so high on the Cubs to make the postseason, the schedule is an excellent indicator as to why. They've got 16 games against last place teams, the Royals, Rockies, and Pirates, along with 3 against the Tigers. But perhaps most intriguing are the 7 games they have against the fading D-backs, a team who plays at a stadium that often has its fair share of Cubs fans in it anyway. Chicago has done the hard part. It has the right runway to finish this thing out strong. Per Fangraphs, that 471 remaining SOS is tied for the lowest in all of MLB. The Baltimore Orioles. Of all the contenders of the top seeds in the American League, the Orioles are sitting pretty for one specific reason: the number of games they have against teams outside their still quite difficult division. Sure, they got a combined 14 games left against the Rays, Blue Jays, and Red Sox. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. Not to mention an intriguing 3-game series against the Astros, a team they just struggled against at home earlier this month. But other than that, check out their non-division foes, the A's, the Rockies, White Sox, Chicago to be more specific, the Nationals, D-backs, and Cardinals. The Orioles could blitzkrieg those teams and not even have to sweat the rest of the division. Ranked number 24, near 500. The Seattle Mariners. Their raw SOS is just middle of the pack, but allow me to explain. Seattle's terrific post-All-Star break run has them on the cusp of the wild card chase, just a half game behind the Blue Jays for the final spot. But you can make an argument that is just setting up perfectly for the Mariners down the stretch. Sure, 20 of their final 41 games are against the Dodgers, the Astros, Rays, and Rangers. Would have been the other way around, but that's okay. I know what I meant. So that's tough. Even if those American League teams are precisely the ones they need to beat to reach the playoffs anyway. But check out the other opponents. 3 versus the Reds and 18 against more struggling teams, the A's, the Royals, White Sox, Mets, and the Angels. If the Mariners could go 500 in those 20 against contenders, they could get in because of their games is against those bad teams alone. 3 contenders with a difficult path. The Boston Red Sox. The Red Sox have been better than many thought they would be this year, but the final record might not quite reflect that because of the brutal finishing stretch of their schedule. How would you like to have 7 games left against both the Orioles and the Astros? Also, there are 5 against the Rays, 3 against the Dodgers, and 3 against the Rangers. If you're looking for any postseason scouting on the top World Series contenders, the Red Sox are getting some up-close and personal views over the next month or so. The Phillies also have a similarity to remaining SOS, but they are not listed here given that their postseason positioning is a bit more secure, at least for now. Look at the San Francisco Giants. As if navigating the NL West isn't tough enough, the Giants still have to play 6 games against the Braves. Just miserable timing all around right there. They also got 7 against the Dodgers, but the real issue is the lack of games against terrible teams on the back end. They have 7 against the Rocks. Before those games are in Colorado. And as we all know, the home Rockies and road Rockies are like 2 different teams. Even the other 2 teams with losing records the Giants play, the Padres and Guardians, ostensibly still have plenty to play for. The Giants can't take any nights off. We have the Miami Marlins, ranked number 8. The Marlins have had a lot of good fortune to still be in the pennant chase at this point. From their record in 1-run games, 27-11, to their record in extra inning games, 6-2. But the quietest advantage they've had has been their schedule. That's about to end. They only have 3 games left against the Braves, but their games outside the division are tougher than you'd like. 6 against the Dodgers, 7 against the Brewers, and 2 against the Rays. What may save them? The 13 combined games they have left against the Nationals and the Mets. And that's basically it for the contenders with the easiest and toughest schedules remaining. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the scores from yesterday. We have the Seattle Mariners beating the Royals 6-4 to have now at a 3-game win streak, their new winning streak coming back. The Nationals beating the Red Sox 10-7. The New York Mets beating the Cardinals 4-2. The Diamondbacks beating the Padres 3-1. The Dodgers still continuing their winning ways by beating the Brewers 1-0. And they'll make it up today. That it got postponed yesterday. It would have been for the tie against the Tigers and the Guardians. That's the scores from there. Let's go and take a look at the standings now. As we go ahead and start to look at the American League East, the Baltimore Orioles still have a 2-game lead over the Rays. Then you got the Blue Jays 3rd, Red Sox 4th, and the New York Yankees last. Took a look at the AL Central. The Twins have a 4.5-game lead over the Guardians. then the Tigers, the White Sox, and then the Royals. We look at the the AL West. The Texas Rangers have the 2.5 game lead over the Astros. Then you got the Mariners, who are not far behind against the Astros, 3.5. The Angels, 4th, and the Athletics, last. Take a look at the National League. The Atlanta Braves, that will be the NL East, 12.5 games ahead of the Phillies. The Marlins, 3rd, 4th, the Mets, and 5th and last, which is the Nationals. The NL Central, the Milwaukee Brewers have the 2-game lead over both the Cubs and the Reds. Then Pittsburgh, 4th, and then the Cardinals last. Look at the NL West. The Los Angeles Dodgers continue to be on fire, though, with 11-game win streak and has a 10.5 game lead over the Giants. Diamondbacks, 3rd, Padres, 4th, and the Rockies, 5th. Now let's take a look at the wild card standings, though. We'll first start off with American League. The Rays and Astros secure that spot still. Unless they lose that spot. The Blue Jays have the 3rd and final wild card spot, but not too far behind the Blue Jays, which is the Seattle Mariners, just a half game behind. Then the Red Sox, 3 games behind Seattle. Yankees, the Angels, the Guardians, Tigers, White Sox, the Royals, the Athletics. Then we look at the National League. We have the Philadelphia Phillies and San Francisco Giants have those 2 securing spots for now. But take a look at the 3-way there, folks. The Cubs, the Marlins, and the Reds are trying to secure the last wildcard spot for the National League. And this is going to be really interesting from here on out. The Diamondbacks are just 1 game behind, as I mentioned, those 3 teams, the Cubs, the Marlins, and the Reds. Then you got the Padres, the Mets, the Nationals, Pirates, Cardinals, and the Rockies. Last mention, we are about a month and a half away till we get to playoff bound, but this could go interesting, go either way. And that'll do it for the standings. And with that, it's the right time to go ahead and take our first commercial break. And when we come back, we'll do the What Day Is Today, and then follow up with the 54th anniversary of Mick Jagger accidentally shot while filming Ned Kelly in Australia. And we'll do both those things right after this.
Harry is a scratcher who keeps getting scratched. Harry, you need the clear solution to a healthier scalp. Maximum Strength Scalpicin with vitamin E. Not a shampoo, Scalpicin works fast to stop unhealthy scratching that can cause scalp damage with the itch medicine dermatologists recommend. Ah, the all-day confidence of a healthy, itch-free scalp. Maximum Strength Scalpicin, the clear solution to a healthier scalp.
Sore throat pain. It's hard to work, hard to think. Now, end your sore throat emergency fast with extra strength Cepacol lozenges. Unlike ordinary drops, Cepacol numbs sore throat pain fast with its Menthocane action. Menthocane, 2 anesthetics to help you feel better fast. So effective, it's the #1 brand in hospitals.
The pain is gone.
Cepacol lozenges and maximum strength spray for relief on contact. Cepacol ends your sore throat emergency. Sore throat pain. It's hard to work, hard to think. No time for ordinary drops. End your sore throat emergency fast with the strongest Cepacol lozenges ever. Cepacol numbs sore throat pain fast with Menfocaine action. Menfocaine, 2 anesthetics for fast relief. So effective it's #1 in hospitals.
The pain is gone.
And try new Cepacol dual action spray. Numbs pain on contact, coats your throat for comfort. Cepacol ends your sore throat emergency. Sore throat pain. It's hard to work, hard to think. No time for ordinary drops. End your sore throat emergency fast with the strongest Cepacol lozenges ever. Cepacol numbs sore throat pain fast with Menfocaine action. Menfocaine, 2 anesthetics for fast relief. So effective it's #1 in hospitals.
The pain is gone.
And try new Cepacol dual action spray. Numbs pain on contact, coats your throat for comfort. Cepacol ends your sore throat emergency.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. I didn't see you there. Well, I was doing a little bit of way things with that, but apologies in advance. And with that, welcome back to DMS 3000 News Live. And once more, I am your host, Brendan Martin. It was just a short commercial, but that's all good nonetheless. But now let's go and take a look at what day is today. And we'll take a look right now with, we have 18 holidays that are listed for this day. We first take a look at National Couples Day. Love is in the air and it smells sweet with a hint of spice. National Fajita Day. Nothing better than a juicy cut of skirt steak sizzling over an open flame. The Gold Cup Parade. The Gold Cup Parade proves that when citizens of Charlottetown throw a party, everyone turns out. Green Man Festival. Grab your keys and let's head out to Wales' most vibrant festival, Green Man Festival. Hawaiian Shirt Day. Take a stroll through beautiful Hawaii and adorn the Aloha shirt to commemorate the day. Indonesia Constitution Day. The heart and soul of the country is the Constitution. Unity and diversity is Indonesia's identity. Kool-Aid Day. Treat yourself and raise your glass of iced Kool-Aid drink to celebrate the day. Long Tan Day. No, it's not about getting a good tan under the sun. It's a solemn Remembrance Day. National Angela Day. Learn more about the name Angela and the icons in history who go by that name. National Bad Poetry Day. Roses are red, violets are blue. If Shakespeare can write poetry, so can you. National Ice Cream Pie Day. Yummy, yummy, and tummy. Prepare to treat your taste buds to this insanely delicious ice cream pie. National Jaden Day. Learn more about the name Jaden and the people in history going by this name. National Mail Order Catalog Day. Let's celebrate and learn about the world's oldest and most innovative marketing strategies. National Men's Grooming Day. Incorporate some style and grooming techniques into your routine this National Men's Grooming Day. Never Give Up Day. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Never give up. Pinot Noir Day. Grab a wine opener and enjoy a little refinement this Pinot Noir Day. Serendipity Serendipity Day. Let's dare to be different. Try something new and appreciate the beauty of the moment. And World Breast Cancer Research Day. Hug a loved one and learn a bit more about the ongoing struggle to combat breast cancer. And that is it for the What Day Is Today. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the 54th anniversary of Mick Jagger accidentally shot while filming Ned Kelly in Australia. And let's go ahead and read this up right now. When you're playing the role of a 19th century Australian outlaw, the chances are you'll find yourself in a gun battle or two on set. That said, most people would be expecting those battles to be all for show. That was sadly not the case for Mick Jagger when he was shot in the hand on this day in 1969, which is August 18th. The Rolling Stones frontman was playing the titular character of a Tony Richardson film, Ned Kelly. The film looked at the outlaw with a keener eye on his revolutionary ideals, but very little of that would have brought comfort to the strutting Jagger after he took one in the hand during filming. Jagger was keen to move into acting when the Rolling Stones' success was assured. The frontman had become the charismatic mouthpiece of the group, and his natural affinity with the camera lens made him a prime target for filmmakers looking to bolster ticket sales. It hadn't gone down well with the Australian who held Ned Kelly so dear. Kelly has often been portrayed as a reckless criminal without morals or values. Certainly, in this film, that's the only image we really have. While a lot of Australians see Kelly as a Robin Hood type figure, robbing from the rich to give to the poor, it meant the choice of Jagger as a lead was a very divisive one, despite having roots in Australia. It wasn't a great start, and things got progressively worse for Jagger. Earlier in the year, the singer had fired his bandmate and the Rolling Stones founder, Brian Jones. And only weeks later, he was found dead in his own home. To make matters worse, Jagger and his girlfriend, Mariana Faithfull, also cast in the film, had to miss Jones's funeral due to contractual obligations to be in Australia for filming. When they got here, things declined even further. Faithfull was soon fired from the movie after she overdosed on drugs and spent several days in the hospital. In a letter written to another girlfriend, Jagger further denoted the film's compelling curse. The shoot was hit by bad weather. Swaths of the crew went down with an illness. A fire destroyed the costumes, and there were a number of accidents. It was a disaster, but the worst has yet to come. Excuse me, guys. Goodness sakes. And yes, it is allergy season, folks, still. And there's nothing I can do about that. It's just out of my control, but we're going to roll on that one. Jagger was shooting one of his final scenes when things went awry. A pistol loaded with blanks, which he was using at the time, backfired to drive the metal into his hand. The Sydney Morning Herald reported the newspaper confirmed that Jagger had later left a hospital in Canberra heavily bandaged and in a sling under his long fur coat. Still affected by the local anesthetic used to extract the metal, Jagger said he only remembered he was shooting a lot of policemen when the incident occurred. When the film hit the theaters, it was quickly apparent that this had been one of misses, and the critics reviewed as such. Happy to tear down Jagger as a performer in the wrong field. Jagger himself later calling the productions a load of shh. And that's why I'm using, trying to bleep the curse word, because I don't want to say it on this news program, because got to be professional about that. I have to say the shh, all that. So that's why I say those things. As suggested, I only made it because I had nothing else to do. You never know until you do it whether a film will turn out to be a load of shh. And if it does, all you can say is, well, that was a load of shh. And try to make sure you don't do anything like it again. One good thing did come from the experience, however. After suffering serious burns on his right hand, doctors told him to ensure he was exercising it as much as possible, but not to overstrain. It meant Jagger practiced the guitar in a different way, and it led to the origination of the song Brown Sugar. Speaking in 1995 with Rolling Stone, Jagger said, "That's a bit of a mystery, isn't it? I wrote that song in Australia in the middle of the field. There were really odd circumstances. My hand got really damaged in this action sequence. So stupid. I was trying to rehabilitate my hand and had this new kind of electric guitar, and I was playing in the middle of the outback and wrote this tune." I mean, that's not too bad there with, telling his side of the story, regarding of Mick Jagger being shot on the set of Ned Kelly. Thankfully, it wasn't in his, everything else, but thankfully it was just the hand. So, that's a plus on that. Thank goodness. And with that being said, let's go ahead and take another commercial break. And when we do come back, we'll talk about the 411th anniversary of the Pendle Witches trial. And we'll talk about that right after this.
We will return to the CBS special movie presentation of Alice in Wonderland.
Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. Greetings from camp. Hiawatha. Swimming's cool here. But this place is not like home. I miss your nice fresh pillowcases.
You miss Downy? It's so pleasing. April freshness, that's one reason. Downy softness, that's another. Downy freshness makes a difference, love your mother.
Now there's a new Downy. Best Downy yet, April fresher than ever. With a no-mess cap the others don't have. Pours easier, measures easier. And what's left goes back in. No messy bottles. New cap, more April freshness. Best Downy yet.
It's Bosley's Law. She who buys bargain trash bags can be penny wise, but trash foolish. Glad trash bags are made with 3 plies of Stress Flex that lets the bag stretch without breaking. Why take chances? Get Glad.
Is he gonna eat Jif too?
Sure. It's gotta be Jif for my guys. Or girls.
The difference is just being none of your taste. But Sassy means the world to me.
I'll teach him to make the Jif all gone.
The melody one for your special one with a taste for peanutty.
I remember choosing the peanut butter for his first taste. I tried all the big brands, and Jif had more fresh roasted peanut taste.
Peanutty difference in Jif.
Do I have to share if he's a girl?
In a distant land, Santa's elves are especially busy making you something special. A stuffed reindeer ornament just like the reindeer in the new motion picture Santa Claus the Movie.
Good likeness.
And it's free when you buy a $5 book of McDonald's gift certificates. So put plenty of both on your Christmas list. McDonald's gift certificates and free reindeer ornaments. Seeing is believing.
Wednesday on Charlie and Company, will Christmas Eve become a silent night if the kids leave home?
Hold on there, Junior Grinch.
Thursday, a ghost from the past.
The boy from Atlantis. The kid is real.
Unearths a murder case that might end Magnum's future. And when $1 million deal turns deadly, Rick trades places with AJ in a scheme only a mother could love.
Did you know your eyes change color when you're about to do something stupid?
Simon and Simon. Then Gary gets closer to the truth about Empire Valley.
You've been in on this from the beginning.
And the truth is murder.
How do you want me to do it?
Quietly. Knots Landing, Thursday.
The 411th anniversary of Pendle Witches' Trial. The trials of the Pendle Witches in 1612 are among the most famous witch trials in English history and some of the best recorded of the 17th century. The 12 accused lived in the area surrounding Pendle Hill in Lancashire and were charged with the murders of 10 people by the use of witchcraft. All but 2 were tried at Lancaster Assizes on August 18th, 19th, 1612, along with the Salisbury witches and others, in a series of trials that have become known as the Lancashire witch trials. One was tried at York Assizes on July 27th, 1612. Another died in prison. Of the 11 who went to trial, 9 women and 2 men. 10 were found guilty and executed by hanging. 1 was found not guilty. The official publication of the proceedings by the clerk to the court, Thomas Potts, in his wonderful discovery of witches in the county of Lancaster, and the number of witches hanged together, 9 at Lancaster and 1 at York, make the trials unusual for England at that time. It has been estimated that all the English witch trials have been between the early 15th and early 18th centuries, resulting in fewer than 500 executions. This series of trials accounts for more than 2% of that total. 6 of the Pendle witches came from one of 2 families, each at the time headed by a woman in her 80s, Elizabeth Southerns. her daughter Elizabeth Device, and her grandchildren James and Alzon Device, and Whittle, and her daughter Anne Redfern. The others accused were Jane Bulcock and her son John Bulcock, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, Alice Gray, and Jeanette Preston. The outbreaks of witchcraft in and around Pendle may suggest that some people made a living as traditional healers, using a mixture of herbal medicine and talismans, trying to read that correctly, or charms, which might leave them open to charges of sorcery. Many of the allegations resulted from accusations that members of the Demdike and Chattox families made against each other, perhaps because they were in competition, both trying to make a living from healing, begging, and extortion. The accused witches lived in the area around Pendle Hill and Lancashire, a county which, at the end of the 16th century, was regarded by the authorities as a wild and lawless region, an area fabled for its theft, violence, and sexual laxity, where the church was honored without much understanding of its doctrines by the common people. The nearby Cistercian Abbey at Whalley had been dissolved by Henry VIII in 1537, a move strongly resisted by the local people, over whose lives the abbey had until then exerted a powerful influence. Despite the abbey's closure and the execution of its abbot, the people of Pendle remained largely faithful to their Roman Catholic beliefs and were quick to revert the Catholicism on Queen Mary's accession to the throne in 1553. When Mary's Protestant half-sister Elizabeth came to the throne in 1558, Catholic priests once again had to go into hiding, but in remote areas such as Pendle, they continued to celebrate Mass in secret. In 1562, early in her reign, Elizabeth passed a law in the form of the Witchcraft Act 1562. This demanded the death penalty, but only where harm had been caused. Lesser offenses were punishable by a term of imprisonment. The act provided that anyone who should use, practice, or exercise any witchcraft, enchantment, charm, or sorcery, whereby any person shall happen to be killed or destroyed, was guilty of a felony without benefit of clergy and was be put to death. On Elizabeth's death in 1603, I was about to say 1503, that would be going back much years, but she was succeeded by James Strongly. Influenced by Scotland's separation from the Catholic Church during the Scottish Reformation, James was intensely interested in Protestant theology, focusing much of his curiosity on the theology of witchcraft. By the early 1590s, he had become convinced that he was being plotted against the Scottish witches. After a visit to Denmark, he had attended to the trial in 1590 of the North Berwick witches, who were convinced of using witchcraft to send a storm against the ship that carried James and his wife Anne back to Scotland. In 1597, he wrote a book, De Monologi, instructing his followers that they must denounce and prosecute any supporters or practitioners of witchcraft. 1 year after James acceded to the English throne, a law was enacted imposing the death penalty in cases where it was proven that harm had been caused through the use of magic or corpse had been exhumed for magical purposes. James was, however, skeptical of the evidence presented in witch trials, even to the extent of personally exposing discrepancies in the testimonies presented against some accused witches. In early 1612, the year of the trials, every justice of the peace in Lancashire was ordered to compile a list of recusants in their area, those who refused to attend the English church and to take communion. A criminal offense at the time, Roger Nowell of Redhall, on the edge of Pendle Force, was the JP for Pendle. It was against this background of seeking out religious nonconformists that in March 1612, Nowell investigated a complaint made to him by the family of John Lowe, a pediater who claimed to have been injured by witchcraft. Many of those who subsequently became implicated as the investigation progressed did indeed consider themselves to be witches, in the sense of being village healers who practice magic, probably in return for payment, but such men and women were common in 16th century rural England, an accepted part of village life. It was perhaps difficult for the judges charged with hearing the trials, Sir James Altham and Sir Edward Bromley, to understand King James's attitude towards witchcraft. The king was head of the judiciary, and Bromley was hoping for promotion to a circuit near London. Altham was nearing the end of his judicial career, but he had recently been accused of a miscarriage of justice at the York Assizes, which had resulted in a woman being sentenced to death by hanging for witchcraft. The judges may have been uncertain whether the best way to gain the king's favor was by encouraging convictions or by skeptically testing the witnesses to destruction. One of the accused, Demdike, had been regarded in the area as a witch for 50 years, and some of the deaths the witches were accused of had happened many years before Roger Nowell started to take an interest in 1612, the event that seemed to have triggered Nowell's investigation, culminating in the Pendle witch trials, occurred on March 21st, 1612. On her way to Trawden Force, Demdike's granddaughter, Alzon Device, encountered John Law, a pediater from Halifax, and asked him for some pins. 17th century metal pins were handmade and relatively expensive, but they were frequently needed for magical purposes, such as in healing, particularly for treating warts, divination, and for love magic, which may have been why Alzon was so keen to get hold of them, and why Law was so reluctant to sell them to her. Whether she meant to buy them, as she claimed, and Law refused to undo his pact for such a small transaction, or whether she had no money and was begging for them. as Law's son Abraham claimed is unclear. According to the 1613 tract, Potts' Discovery of Witches, the devil appeared in the likeness of a black or brown dog with fiery eyes, which Jeanette Device later claimed was a spirit familiar of her grandmother named Ball, which spoke twice in English, offering to lame him. A few minutes after the encounter with Alzon Device, she said she saw Law stumble and fall, apparently lame. Perhaps because he suffered a stroke, he managed to regain his feet and reach a nearby inn. Initially, Law made no accusations against Alzon, but she appears to have been convinced of her own powers when Abraham Law took her to visit his father for a few days after the incident. She reportedly confessed and asked for his forgiveness. Alzon, her mother Elizabeth, and her brother James were summoned to appear before Null on March 30th, 1612. Alzon confessed that she had sold her soul to the devil and that she had told him to lame John Law after he had called her a thief. That her brother James stated that his sister had also confessed to bewitching a local child. Elizabeth was more reticent, admitting only that her mother, Demdike, had a mark on her body, something that many, including Nowell, would have regarded as having been left by the devil after he had sucked her blood. Which question about Anne Whittle, the matriarch of the other family reputedly involved in witchcraft in and around Pendle. Alzon perhaps saw an opportunity for revenge. There may have been bad blood between the two families, possibly dating from 1601, when a member of Chaddock's family broke into Malkin Tower, the home of the Devices, and stole goods worth about £1, equivalent to about 117 pounds as of 2018. Alzon accused Chaddock's of murdering 4 men by witchcraft and of killing her father, John Device, who had died in 1601. She claimed that her father had been so frightened of old Chaddock's that he had agreed to give her 8 pounds of oatmeal each year in return for a promise not to hurt his family. The meal was handed over annually until the year before John's death. On his deathbed, John claimed that his sickness had been caused by Chaddock's because they had not paid for protection. On April 2nd, 2016, I was way off on that one, 1612, Demdike, Chaddock's, and Chaddock's daughter, Anne Redfern, were summoned to appear before Null. Both Demdike and Chaddock's were by then blind and in their 80s, and both provided Null with damaging confessions. Demdike claimed that she had given her soul to the devil 20 years previously, and Chaddock's that she had given her soul to a thing like a Christian man. On his promise that she would not lack anything and would get any revenge she desired, although Anne Redfern made no confession, Demdike said that she had seen her making clay figures. Margaret Crook, another witness seen by Null that day, claimed that her brother had fallen sick and died after having a disagreement with Redfern, and that he had frequently blamed her for his illness. Because on the evidence and confessions he had obtained, Nall committed Demdike, Shaddix, and Edward Redfern and Alzon Device to Lancaster Gaol to be tried for maleficence, causing harm by witchcraft, and at the next assizes. The committal and subsequent trial of the four women might have been at the end of the matter had it not been for the meeting organized by Elizabeth Device at Malkin Tower, the home of the Demdikes, held on Good Friday, April 10th, 1612. To feed the party, James Device stole a neighbor's sheep. Friends and others sympathetic to the family attended, and when word of it reached Roger Nowell, he decided to investigate. On April 27, 1612, an inquiry was held before Nowell and another magistrate, Nicholas Bannister, to determine the purpose of the meeting at Malkin Tower, who had attended, and what had happened there. As a result of the inquiry, 8 more people were accused of witchcraft and committed for trial: Elizabeth Device, James Device, and Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, John Bulcock, Jane Bulcock, Alice Gray, and Jeanette Preston. Preston lived across the border in Yorkshire. She was set for trial at York Assizes. The others were set to Lancaster Gaol to join the 4 already imprisoned there. Malkin Tower is believed to have been near the village of New Church in Pendle, or possibly in Blacko, on the site of present-day Malkin Tower Farm, and to have been demolished soon after the trials. The Pendle witches were tried in the group that's also included in the Sam Lesbury witches, Jane Southworth, Jeanette Brierly, and Ellen Brierly. The charges against whom included child murder, cannibalism. Margaret Pearson, the so-called Paddington witch, who was facing her 3rd trial for witchcraft, this time for killing a horse, and Isabel Roby from Windle, accused of using witchcraft to cause sickness. Some of the accused Pendle witches, such as Alzon Device, seem to have generally believed that in their guilt, but others protested their innocence to the end. Jeanette Preston was the first to be tried at York Assizes. Jeanette Preston lived in Gisborne, which was then in Yorkshire, so she was sent to York Assizes for trial. Her judges were Sir James Altham and Sir Edward Bromley. Jeanette was charged with the murder by witchcraft of a local landowner, Thomas Lister of Westby Hall, to which she pleaded not guilty. She had already appeared before Bromley in 1611, accused of murdering a child by witchcraft, but had been found not guilty. The most damning evidence given against her was that when she had been taken to see Lister's body, the corpse bled fresh, blown presently, in the presence of all that were there present after she touched it, according to a statement made to Nowell by James Device on April 27th. Jeanette had attended the Malkin Tower meeting to seek help with Lister's murder. She was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Her execution took place on July 29th. On the Knavsmire to the present site of York Racecourse. All the other accused lived in Lancashire, so they were sent to Lancaster Assizes for trial, where the judges were once again Alton and Bromley. The prosecutor was local magistrate Roger Nowell, who had been responsible for collecting the various statements and confessions from the accused. 9-year-old Jeanette Device was a key witness for the prosecution, something that would not have been permitted in many other 17th century criminal trials. However, King James had made a case for suspending the normal rules of evidence for witchcraft trials in his De Monology, as well as identifying those who had attended the Malkintyre meeting. Jeanette also gave evidence against her mother, brother, and sister. 9 of the accused, Alzon Device, Elizabeth Device, James Device, and Whittle and Redfern, Alice Nutter, Catherine Hewitt, John Bulcock, and Jane Bulcock, were found guilty during the 2-day trial and hanged at Gallows Hill in Lancaster on August 20th, 1612. Elizabeth Southerns died while awaiting trial. Only one of the accused, Alice Gray, was found not guilty. Take a look at August 18th, this day. Anne Whittle was accused of the murder of Robert Nutter. She pleaded not guilty, but the confession she had made to Roger Nowell, likely under torture, was read out in court, and evidence against her was presented by James Robinson, who had lived in the Chattox family 20 years earlier. He claimed to remember that Nutter had accused Chattox of turning his beer sour, and that she was commonly believed to be a witch. Chattox broke down and admitted her guilt, calling on God for forgiveness, and the judges to be merciful to her daughter, Anne Redfern. Elizabeth Device was charged with the murders of James Robinson, John Robinson, and together with Alice Nutter and Demdike, the murder of Henry Mitten. Elizabeth Device vehemently maintained her innocence. Potts records that his odious witch suffered from a facial deformity resulting in her left eye being set lower than her right. The main witness against Device was her daughter Jeanette, who was about 9 years old when Jeanette was brought into the courtroom and was asked to stand up and give evidence against her mother. Elizabeth, confronted with her own child making accusations that would lead to her execution, began to curse and scream at her daughter, forcing the judges to have her removed from the courtroom before the evidence could be heard. Jeanette was placed on a table and stated that she believed her mother had been a witch for 3 or 4 years. She also said her mother had a familiar Ball who appeared in the shape of a brown dog. Jeanette claimed to have witnessed conversations between Ball and her mother, in which Ball had been asked to help with various murders. James Device also gave evidence against his mother, saying that he had seen her making a clay figure of one of her victims, John Robinson. Elizabeth Device was found guilty. James Device pleaded not guilty to the murders by witchcraft and Anne Townley and John Duckworth. However, he, like Chattox, had earlier made a confession to Nowell, which was read out in court. That and the evidence presented against him by his sister Jeanette, who said that she had seen her brother asking a black dog he had conjured up to help him kill Townley, was sufficient to persuade the jury to find him guilty. And we take a look at August 19th, that next day. The trials of the three Salisbury witches, which were heard before Anne Redfernay's first appearance in court late in the afternoon, charged with the murder of Robert Nutter. The evidence against her was considered unsatisfactory, and she was acquitted. Ed Redfernay was not so fortunate the following day when she faced her second trial for the murder of Robert Nutter's father, Christopher, to which she pleaded not guilty. Demdike's statement to Nowell, which accused Anne of having made clay figures of the Nutter family, was read out in court. Witnesses were called to testify that Anne was a witch, more dangerous than her mother, but she refused to admit her guilt to the end and had given no evidence against any others of the accused. Ed Redfernay was found guilty. Jane Bulcock and her son John Bulcock, both from New Church in Pendle, were accused and found guilty of the murder by witchcraft, and Jeanette Deane both denied that they had attended the meeting at Malkin Tower, but Jeanette Device identified Jane as having been one of those present and John as having turned to spit to roast the stolen sheep. The centerpiece of a Good Friday meeting at the Demdike's home, Alice Nutter was unusual among the accused in being comparatively wealthy, the widow of a tenant yeoman farmer. She made no statement either before or during her trial, except to enter her plea of not guilty to the charge of murdering Henry Minton by witchcraft. The prosecution alleged that she, together with Demdike and Elizabeth Device, had caused Minton's death. After he refused to give Demdike a penny she had begged from him, the only evidence against Alice seems to have been that James Device claimed Demdike had told him of the murder, and Jeanette Device, in her statement, said that Alice had been present at the Malkin Tower meeting. Alice may have called in on the meeting in Malkin Tower on her way to a secret Good Friday Catholic service and refused to speak for fear of incriminating her fellow Catholics. Many of the Nutter family were Catholics, and two had been executed of Jesuit priests, John Nutter in 1584 and his brother Robert in 1600. Alice Nutter was found guilty. Catherine Hewitt was charged and found guilty of the murder of Anne Folds. She was the wife of a clothier from Colney and had attended the meeting at Malkin Tower with Alice Gray. According to the evidence given by James Device, both Hewitt and Gray told the others at the meeting that they have killed a child from Colney and Folds. Jeanette Device also picked Catherine out of a lineup and confirmed her attendance at the Malkin Tower meeting. Alice Gray was accused with Catherine Hewitt of the murder of Anne Folds. Potts does not provide an account of Alice Gray's trial, simply recording her as one of the Salisbury witches, which she was not, and as she was one of the identified as having been at the Malkin Tower meeting, and naming her in the list of those found not guilty. Alexander Device, whose encounter John Law had triggered the events leading up to the trials, was charged with causing harm by witchcraft. Uniquely among the accused, Alzon was confronted in court by her alleged victim, John Law. She seems to have genuinely believed in her own guilt. When Law was brought into court, Alzon fell to her knees in tears and confessed she was found guilty. Almost everything that is known about the trials comes from a report of the proceedings written by Thomas Potts, the clerk to the Lancaster Assizes. Potts was instructed to write his account by the trial judges and had completed the work by November 16, 1612. When he submitted for review, Bromley revised and corrected the manuscript before its publication in 1613, declaring it to be truly reported and fit and worthy to be published. Excuse me. Although written as an apparently verbatim account, The Wonderful Discovery is not a report of what was actually said at the trial, but is instead reflecting what happened. Nevertheless, Potts seemed to give a generally trustworthy, although not comprehensive, account of the evidence-sized witchcraft trial, provided that the reader is constantly aware of his use of his written material instead of verbatim reports. The trials took place not quite 7 years after the gunpowder plot to blow up houses of Parliament, an attempt to kill King James, and the Protestant aristocracy had been foiled. It was alleged that the Pendle witches had hatched their own gunpowder plot to blow up Lancaster Castle, although historian Stephen Pumphrey has suggested that the preposterous scheme was invented by the examining magistrates and simply agreed to by James Device in his witness statement. It may therefore be significant that Potts dedicated The Wonderful Discovery to Thomas Knyvet and his wife Elizabeth. Knyvet was the man credited with apprehending Guy Fawkes and thus saving the king. It had been estimated that all the English witch trials between the early 15th and early 18th centuries resulted in fewer than 500 executions. So this one series of trials in July and August 1612 accounts for more than 2% of that total. Court records show that Lancashire was unusual in the north of England for the frequency of its witch trials. Neighboring Cheshire, for instance, also suffered from economic problems and religious activists, but there only 47 people were indicted for causing harm by witchcraft between 1589 and 1675, of whom 11 were found guilty. Pendle was part of the parish of Whalley, an area covering 180 square miles, too large to be effective in preaching and teaching the doctrines of the Church of England. Both the survival of Catholicism and the upsurge of witchcraft in Lancashire have been attributed to its overstretched parochial structure. Until its dissolution, the spiritual needs of the people of Pendle and surrounding districts had been served by nearby Whalley Abbey. But its closure in 1537 left a moral vacuum. Many of the allegations made in the Pendle witch trials resulted from members of the Demdike and Chaddock's families making accusations against each other. Historian John Swain has said that the outbreaks of witchcraft in and around Pendle demonstrate the extent to which people could make a living either by posing as a witch or by accusing or threatening to accuse others of being a witch. Although it is implicit in much of the literature of witchcraft that the accused were victims, often mentally or physically abnormal. For some, at least, it may have been a trade like any other, albeit one with significant risk. There may have been bad blood between the Demdike and Chaddock's families because they were in competition with each other, trying to make a living from healing, begging, or extortion. The Demdikes are believed to have lived close to New Church in Pendle, and the Chaddock's family about 2 miles away near the village of Thence. And I'll just go ahead and stop right there. And now there's basically the aftermath and legacy, literary adaptations and other media, the 2012 anniversary, all that other stuff. Whew. That was some good information there in this one. So we'll just go ahead and take at least one more commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the 60th anniversary of James Meredith graduating at Ole Miss, the first African American, and potentially do this is an editorial if we have time for that, but if we don't, then it will be talked about. That was planned, that was supposed to be today, will be moved over to Wednesday. And again, basically it is a change of plans, if that happens. So, but with that, we'll go ahead and take one more break, and we'll take time out for this, as we'll be back with you for more DMS 3000 News Live after the break.
Before you slide into that satin, before you slip into that silk, before you put on anything at all, caress. Before you dress, Caress isn't a soap. It's the body bar with bath oil. Caress can't dry your skin the way soap can. Gives you the soft you just can't get from soap. After all, shouldn't your skin be softer than anything that goes next to it? Before you dress, Caress.
If you've got a good trade, chances are you've already got a good job. If you haven't, better get one. Auto mechanic. Now there's a good trade. At Apex Tech, we've got a 6-month training program for auto mechanics. It's thorough because we work you hard. With a professional mechanic working alongside you, you tear down an engine and put it back together again, and do the same with the transmission. Carburetors, fuel injection, computer command control, electrical chassis, alignment, brakes, steering. It's all in your training program. When you complete your training, and we recommend you for a job, you've got your own set of professional tools. Give us a call. Say when you can come in to look over the shops and see what financial assistance towards your training you're entitled to from the government. Now, I can't phone you. You have to take the first step. Call 645-3300. Our switchboard is open now. 645-3300.
Ah, the Nature Valley Granola Bar. Such simple sweetness. Such enjoyable crunch. Once you come to know this wonderfully wholesome taste, you realize a Nature Valley Granola Bar could be the candy bar nature intended.
Oh, you're looking at a broken peanut. All I ever wanted was to get into a Fifth Avenue candy bar so I can be irresistible. But they don't want peanuts. They want peanut butter. Crunchy layer after layer of peanut butter smothered in Hershey's pure milk chocolate. Oh, it'll be a grind, but I'm gonna do it. After all, it's Hershey, it's Fifth Avenue, it's everything it's cracked up to be. And if they won't have me, I'm gonna throw myself to the elephants.
You know, I've heard that being sexy is all in the mind. But I think that it's somewhere else.
Jovan Musk.
Staying sexy is an all-day job. And for some of us, the end of the day is just the beginning.
Jovan Musk, Evening Edition. We help American men stay sexy.
Tired of losing battle after battle in the sky, the Autobots create the ultimate robot jet, Jetfire. But the evil Decepticons have a secret new weapon, Shockwave.
Shockwave will stop them!
Sold separately from Hasbro.
The bakers are here.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Cinnamon and sugar, we're baking up a bunch. We're cinnamon and sugar shakers.
The bakers.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch bakers.
We make Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal taste
like homemade.
Part of this nutritious breakfast.
Less sugar than I thought.
Making homemade taste.
I like it.
Into Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
All right, we welcome you back to DMS 3000 News Live. And yet again, I am your host, Brennan Martin. And we'll go ahead and go over the 60th anniversary of James Meredith. Graduates at Ole Miss, the first African-American to do so. Take a look at him right now. James Howard Meredith is an American civil rights activist, writer, political advisor, and United States Air Force veteran who became, in 1962, the first African-American student admitted to the racially segregated University of Mississippi after the intervention of a federal government inspired by President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address. Excuse me. And what's good morning to you, Dante? Hopefully you're doing well on this Friday morning and been listening in. Where was I? Oh, yes. Inspired by President John F. Kennedy's inaugural address, Meredith decided to exercise his constitutional rights and applied to the University of Mississippi. His goal was to put pressure on the Kennedy administration to enforce civil rights for African Americans. The admission of Meredith ignited the Ole Miss riot of 1962, where Meredith's life was threatened and 31,000 American servicemen were required to quell the violence, the largest ever invocation of the Insurrection Act of 1807. In 1966, Meredith planned a solo 220-mile march against fear from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. He wanted to highlight continuing racism in the South and encourage voter registration after passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He did not want to major civil rights organizations involved. The second day, he was shot by white gunmen and suffered numerous wounds. Leaders of major organizations vowed to complete the march in his name after he was taken to the hospital. While Meredith was recovering, more people from across the country became involved as marchers. He rejoined the march, and when Meredith and the other leaders entered Jackson on June 26, they were leading an estimated 15,000 marchers, in which was the largest civil rights march in Mississippi. During the march, more than 4,000 African Americans registered to vote. And it was a catalyst to continued community organizing and additional registration. In 2002 and again in 2012, University of Mississippi led year-long series of events to celebrate the 40th and 50th anniversaries of Meredith's integration of the Constitution. He was among numerous speakers invited to the campus, where a statue of him commemorates his role. The Lyceum, the Circle Historic District at the center of the campus, has been designated as a National Historic Landmark for these events. Meredith was born in 1933 in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, the son of Roxy and Moses Meredith. He is of African American, English Canadian, Scots, and Choctaw heritage. His family nickname was J-Boy. European traders intermarried with some Choctaw during the colonial period. In the 1830s, thousands of Choctaws chose to stay in Mississippi and become United States citizens when most of the tribe left their traditional homeland for Indian Territory during the federally imposed removal. Those in the slate had unions with European Americans and African Americans, adding to the multiracial population in the developing territory. Meredith completed 11th grade at the Attala County Training School and completed 12th grade at Gibbs High School in St. Petersburg, Florida. He graduated from high school in 1951. Then Meredith enlisted in the United States Air Force. He served from 1951 to 1960. Excuse me. Afterward, Meredith attended Jackson State University for 2 years, achieving good grades. Then we go to the University of Mississippi. In 1961, inspired the day before the U.S. President John F. Kennedy, Meredith started to apply to the University of Mississippi, intending to insist on his civil rights to attend the state-funded university. It is still admitted only white students under the state's culture of racial segregation, although the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education that segregation of public schools was unconstitutional, as they are supported by all the taxpayers. Meredith wrote in his application that he wanted admission for his country, race, family, and himself. He said, "Nobody handpicked me. I believe and believe now that I have divine responsibility. I am familiar with the probable difficulties involved in such a move as I am undertaking, and I am fully prepared to pursue it all the way to a degree from the University of Mississippi." He was twice denied admission. During this time, he was advised by Medgar Evers, who was the head of the state chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. On May 31st, 1961, Meredith was backing of the NAACP Legal Defense and National Educational Fund, filed suit in the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Mississippi, alleging that the university had rejected him only because of his race, as he had a highly successful record of military service and academic courses. The case went through many hearings, after which the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit ruled that Meredith had the right to be admitted to the state school. The state appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which supported the ruling of the appeals court. On September 13th, 1962, the district court entered an injunction directing the members of the Board of Trustees and the officials of the University to register Meredith, the Democratic governor of Mississippi. Well, top of the morning to you there, Danny. Hopefully you're doing well on this Friday morning. Getting ready for the weekend coming up. The Democratic governor of Mississippi, Ross Barnett, declared no school will be integrated in Mississippi. While I am your governor, the state legislature quickly created a plan. They passed a law that denied admission to any person who has a crime of moral turpitude against him or who had been convicted of any felony offense or not pardoned. The same day, it became law. Meredith was accused and convicted of false voter registration and absentia in Jackson County. The conviction against Meredith was trumped up. Meredith both owned land in northern Mississippi and was registered to vote in Jackson, where he lived. Later, the clerk testified that Meredith was qualified to register and vote in Jackson. On September 20th, the federal government obtained an injunction against enforcement of this act and of the 2 state court decrees that had barred Meredith's registration. Excuse me. Dang. Sorry, y'all. Again, it's allergies, folks. It's all good. Okay, where was it? That barred Meredith's registration. That day, Meredith was rebuffed again by Governor Barnett, and his efforts to gain admission through university officials were prepared to admit him. On September 28th, the Court of Appeals en banc, and after a hearing, found the governor in civil contempt and ordered that he be arrested and pay a fine of $10,000 for each day that he kept up the refusal, unless he compiled by October 2nd. On September 29th, Lieutenant Governor Paul B. Johnson Jr. was also found in contempt by a panel of the court, and a similar order was entered against him with a fine of $5,000 a day. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy had a series of phone calls with Governor Barnett between September 27th and October 1st. Barnett reluctantly agreed to let Meredith enroll in the university, but secretly bargained with Kennedy on a plan which would allow him to save face. Barnett committed to maintain civil order. Robert Kennedy ordered 127 U.S. Marshals as well as 316 deputized U.S. Border Patrol and 97 Federal Bureau of Prisons officers to accompany Meredith during his arrival and registration. On September 29th, President Kennedy issued a proclamation commanding all persons engaged in the obstruction of the laws and the orders of the trial of the courts to cease and desist therefrom and to dispense and retire peacefully forthwith, citing his authority under the 10 U.S.C. 332, 333, and 334 to use the militia or the armed forces to suppress any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful accommodation, or conspiracy. On the evening of September 29th, the day after State Senator George Yarborough withdrew the state highway police, a riot broke out. Whites opposing integration had been gathering at the campus and began fighting with federal agents, despite the Kennedy administration's reluctance to use force. It ordered the nationalized Mississippi National Guard and federal troops to the campus. In the violent clashes which followed, 2 civilians were killed by gunshot wounds, and white rioters burned cars, pelted federal agents and soldiers with rocks, bricks, and small arms fire, and damaged university property. The day after the riots on October 1st, 1962, after federal and state forces took control, Meredith became the first African-American student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Meredith's admission is regarded as a pivotal moment in the history of civil rights in the United States. Many students harassed Meredith during his 2 semesters on campus, but others accepted him. According to first-person accounts, students living in Meredith's dorm bounced basketballs on the floor just above his room through all hours of the night. Other students ostracized him when Meredith walked into the cafeteria for meals. The students eating would turn their backs. If Meredith sat at a table with other students, all of whom were white, the students would immediately get up and go to another table. He persisted through harassment and extreme isolation to graduate on August 18th, to this date, 1963, with a degree in political science. Meredith continued his education focusing on political science at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. He returned to the United States in 1965. He attended law school through a scholarship at Columbia University and earned an LLB, not P why I say that, but that's okay, in 1968. In 1966, Meredith organized and led a solo personal march against fear for 220 miles from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, beginning on June 6, 1966, inviting only black men to join him. He wanted to highlight continuing racial oppression in the Mississippi Delta, as well as to encourage blacks to register and vote following passage of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, which authorized federal oversight and enforcement of rights. Governor Paul Johnson promised to allow the march and provide state highway police protection. Meredith wanted blacks in Mississippi to overcome fear of violence. Despite police on the second day, Meredith was shot and wounded by Aubrey James Norville, a white man whose motives were never determined and who pleaded guilty at trial. Meredith was quickly taken to a hospital. Leaders of major organizations rallied at the news and vowed to complete the march in Meredith's name. They struggled to reconcile differing goals, but succeeded in attracting more than 10,000 marchers from local towns and across the country by the end. Meredith recovered from his wounds and rejoined the march before it reached Jackson on June 26, when 15,000 marchers entered the city in what had become the largest civil rights march in state history. During the march, more than 4,000 black Mississippians registered to vote. Continued community organizing was catalyzed by these events, and African Americans began to enter the political system again. Black voters in Mississippi have established a high rate of voter registration and voting participation. In 1967, while living and studying in New York, Meredith decided to run as Republican against incumbent Adam Clayton Powell Jr., a multi-term Democrat, in a special election for the congressional seat in Harlem. He withdrew from the race, and Powell was reelected. Meredith said later of his campaign, "The Republican Party made me an offer, full support in every way, everything." He had full access to top New York Republicans. After returning to Mississippi to live in 1972, Meredith ran for the U.S. Senate against Democratic Senator James Eastland, who had been the incumbent for 29 years in what had operated as a one-party state following provisions of a new state constitution in 1890 that made voter registration extremely difficult. African Americans have been effectively disenfranchised, and the Republican Party had been crippled. Meredith conceded that he had little chance of winning unless Governor George Wallace of Alabama entered the presidential race and split the white vote. An active Republican, Meredith served from 1989 to 1991 as a domestic advisor on the staff of United States Senator Jesse Helms. Faced with criticism from the civil rights community and working for the avowed segregationist, Meredith said that he had applied to every member of the Senate and House offering his services, and only Helms' office responded. He also wanted a chance to do research at the Library of Congress. In 2002, officials at the University of Mississippi celebrated the 40th anniversary of Meredith's historic admission and integration and the institution with a year-long series of events. Of the celebration, Meredith said, "It was an embarrassment for me to be there. And for somebody to celebrate it, oh my God. I want to go down in history and have a bunch of things named after me, but believe me, that ain't it." He said he had achieved his main goal at the time by getting the federal government to enforce his rights as a citizen. He saw his actions as an assault on white supremacy. In 2003, he was far more proud than that his son Joseph Meredith graduated as the top doctoral student at the university's graduate business school. His legacy: 2002, the University of Mississippi honored the 40th anniversary of Meredith's admission in numerous events. 2006, a statue of him was dedicated on campus in his honor. 2012, the university commemorated the 50th anniversary of the historic mission, featuring a range of speakers, artists, lectures, and events during the year. That year, Meredith received the Harvard Graduate of School of Education Medal for Education Impact and was the school's convocation speaker. Meredith said it was the first award in 50 years he had accepted. In 2011, miniseries The Kennedys, he was portrayed by Matthew G. Brown in episode 5 of the series Life Sentences. A highly independent man, Meredith has identified as an individual American citizen who demanded and received the constitutional rights held by any American, not as a participant in the civil rights movement. There have been tensions between him and leaders of major organizations of the movement. When interviewed in 2002, the 40th anniversary of his enrollment at University of Mississippi, Meredith said, "Nothing could be more insulting to me than the concept of civil rights. It means perpetual second-class citizenship for me and my kind." Meredith was a supporter of the unsuccessful 1967 gubernatorial bid of ex-Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett, as well as the 1991 gubernatorial campaign of Louisiana State Representative and ex-Klansman David Duke. 2002 interview with CNN, Meredith said of his efforts to integrate Ole Miss, I was engaged in a war. I consider myself engaged in a war from day one, and my objective was to force the federal government, the Kennedy administration at the time, into a position where they would have to use the United States military force to enforce my rights as a citizen. On March 14th, 1956, Meredith married Mary June Wiggins. She later worked as a high school English teacher. They had 3 sons, James, John, and Joseph Howard Meredith. Mary June Meredith died from a heart failure in December 1979. 1982, Meredith married Judy also Brooks in Gary, Indiana. She had 1 son, Kip Naylor. From a previous marriage, Jessica Howard Meredith was born to their union. The couple lived in Jackson, Mississippi. His works in 1966, his memoir, 3 Years in Mississippi, was published by the Indiana University Press. He has published several books on politics and society. And just like that, that will do it for DMS 3000 News Live. Unfortunately, we don't have time for this is an editorial. However, that will be saved for Wednesday unless if I'm not there. But I will keep you updated regarding if I'm going to be there Wednesday or not, just to let you know in advance. But with that, thank you guys so much for watching DMS 3000 News Live, episode 45. If you like this, please go and give this a thumbs up. And please like this video, leave a comment. And if you're brand new to the David 3000 Network, make sure to subscribe. And also not forget to tap that notification bell under the David 3000 Network on your YouTube app so you'll never miss an upload or a live stream. And coming up in about 8 minutes or less, it'll be Snowman in the Morning with the boys, Cole Johnson and Snowman, to talk about whatever they have in their minds of the world of sports, baseball, basketball, all that stuff. And with that being said, even though you'll potentially get to see me Wednesday or not, like I said, I'll keep you up to date, even though we'll probably be on Thursday. But with that, you'll get to see me next week, but you'll get to see Jason DeCanio this coming Monday and Tuesday for both, respectively, for episode 46 and 47. And with that said, have a great weekend, everybody. And you guys have a great morning and great day. And we'll see you, and you'll see me again next week. You'll see Jason DeCanio this coming Monday and Tuesday. So, bye-bye, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe to the David Thousand Network for great more content like this one.